Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I want to talk to you about something that many of us think about. Dr. Umesh Khanna asked me to talk about it because none of us actually do it, which is clinical research, but clinical research done from inside a private practice, not at a big academic center. Actually, right where you work, where the patients that you see are. And I'm going to promise you this: everything that I will share today is practical. You'll be able to act on it whenever you want, as soon as you want, whether you run a small clinic or a 50-bed nursing home. So let me start with a small reframe. Every time you see a patient, you are already doing something that looks a lot like research. Now, think about it. You have a patient who walks into your office. They are at a baseline state. They have a blood pressure. You measure the blood sugar. You list their symptoms. Then, based on what you derive out of that, you give an intervention. It could be a drug. It could be change in the dose of a drug. It could be just a piece of advice or a surgery. And finally, it leads to an outcome. The patients will get better, they may get worse, they may not change, or something may change. So, baseline, intervention, outcome. That is exactly what a hypothesis test sounds like. You are running every day several hypotheses and coming out with answers several times a day. The only difference between that and research is whether you write it down in a way that the others can use. That's it. Right now, what you use is only for you, but not for others. So, research isn't really a different universe, it is just clinical reasoning, which is made visible to others. So, the question is, why should you care? Here is an interesting finding which you may not have thought about. Uh, this is taken from a paper that was published some years ago, where researchers looked at common medical practices, which were then common medical practices which are already established, and then they actually tested them rigorously in randomized controlled trials. And they found that actually even established practices turned out to be correct only in less than 40% of times. So what it means, it just means that we we are not doing as much as we could because we simply take certain things for granted, whereas they need to be tested rigorously. This is not about you being a bad doctor or I being a bad doctor. This is just a gap between what you assume we work and what the evidence actually supports. And this gap is present everywhere in medicine. So the next question is, why should we care about research? And you can see the 3 points or the 3 reasons that are listed on the right side of the slide. Good research improves patient outcomes. Good research advances the practice. And only if we are able to do, we will, this kind of research will be able to shape our national guidelines. Otherwise, we'll always remain dependent on guidelines that are developed elsewhere. Now, let's put some numbers to this context. Uh, Over 70% of healthcare in India is delivered by private practitioners such as you, by people who might be watching this presentation, and others, your friends, etc. But yet, another important fact is that less than 2% of the world's clinical trial data comes from Indian private practice. Now, even though you see the patients, you just don't capture what happens to them in a world that the world can see. Thousands of patients walk through Indian clinics every single day. This is such a gold mine, and these questions are there in our waiting rooms. We simply need to be smart enough to write down the answers. So now let's move into the next phase of this talk, which is about how to get started, because that is where most of us get stuck on. The honest truth is that the biggest barrier isn't money, it isn't time, it is just not knowing where to begin. So let's try and fix that. So the first thing to say is that we all can start where we are. We don't need a lab, we don't need a grant, we just need a notebook. It could be paper, it could be your phone, it really doesn't matter. The first thing to do is to start taking notice. Keep a running list of questions that bother you during your clinic. Next, you define. When the same question shows up several times a week, then of course it is not a random thought anymore. That it becomes a research question itself. Then, once you have a research question, you try to find ways to address those. And the best thing to do is to connect with your colleagues, peers, find someone who you can think it through with. And in the end, then you go ahead and launch with something small. It could be a retrospective look or a case series. So here is a simple filter for whether a question is worth chasing. That you see in the bottom panel. And the acronym there for you to remember is called FINER. FINER stands for feasible, interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant. If the question that is arising in your mind, if it ticks these 5 boxes, you have something. For example, in a nephrology world, you might ask the question, do my diabetic kidney patients on this drug, any drug, do better than the ones that are on some other drug? This is feasible, this is interesting, this is relevant. And so here is the real study sitting in your records right now. I would like to point out that you're not meant to do this alone. And frankly, people who try to do things or research alone, they quit quite soon. So let's build a small network. You might want to partner with 2-3 colleagues in similar practices, and suddenly that makes your 50 patients to 200 patients, and your findings mean much more. You can link up with a local medical college for methodology and ethics support. You can work with professional societies. Many of them run mentorship programs. And don't ever underestimate the power of a simple WhatsApp group of 5 motivated colleagues. This is how real consortium really begins. And on the right side, you see an African proverb which really captures it. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Research is actually a go far kind of a project. Now, before you fall in love with collaboration, let me give you some reality check. The single fastest way to actually destroy a good collaboration is to leave the awkward questions unspoken till the end. What are these unspoken awkward questions? Often it is about who owns the data, who will become the first author, who will become the last author, who is the corresponding author. So this should be sorted out right in the beginning. One helpful set of criteria are the ICMJE criteria, and you can use the ICMJE criteria to decide who should be authors. If you are contributing, for example, you're recruiting patients, that itself is a major contribution, right? You must make sure that your intellectual contribution is named. You should not be just a recruitment labor, all right? Because this is something which often causes more collaborations to end. So establishing a simple understanding upfront prevents many of it. Now let's go to the next section. Often people will say, "Oh, really? I don't have time to collect data." It's a fair point. So let me show how can you collect data without adding a separate job to your day. So the secret work here is integration and not addition. Please do not build a parallel workflow. It's going to collapse your already very busy day. Instead, try and embed data capture into the visits that you're already doing. So there are certain options which are listed here. You can go digital. There are simple ways of doing it, such as Google Form. You can use a clean Excel sheet. Or if you're using an electronic medical record, you can export data directly from there. If you don't have access to digital tools, you can still use old-fashioned paper. These could be pre-printed forms, tick box checklists. You can even have carbon copies if you use them, if you're really, really old-fashioned. Or you can mix the two. You can capture routine care on paper, research fields on your phone, or you can take a photo of the lab report. You can make a quick voice note on your phone for an observation. One advice I'll give you is to train one staff member for 10 minutes to capture 3 or 4 extra fields per patient. That's it. That right there becomes your research infrastructure. It takes much less than you think. Now you will say there are a number of practical challenges. I agree with you. Indian practice is not easy to run, so let's be honest about it. Uh, and these are the challenges listed on the left here and possible solutions on the right side. So you can train just one dedicated person. Like I said, use photo capture and digitize once a week. You can embed 3 to 4 data fields into your existing forms. We already mentioned all of this, right? So if there are no EMR systems, use Google Forms or simple toolboxes, RedCap, etc., which is free for academics. Now, let's look into really the mechanics of these trials. How do you start? So easiest way to start is simply to do some retrospective analysis and then to move on to doing pragmatic trials. So let's start with retrospective analysis. Excuse me. So retrospective study is a way to look backwards at the data that you already have. You have been tracking outcomes at all, even if they are scribbled in the margins, you can do this. So there are 5 steps to this shown here from left to right. The first thing is to define your research question, and once you have that, then you pull the patient records from your files, etc. Once you have taken the records out, extract the data points that matter, and then you can run basic statistics. You don't have to know statistics yourself. Take help from a colleague, a student, and once you've done that, you can interpret it and write it up. That's it. That goes to the end of it. For example, here is a situation on the slide. You ask the question, what is the 1-year adherence rate on SGLT2 inhibitors? You can ask the question, how does outcome differs between early and late dialysis referrals? You can ask what are the common adverse events I have observed with a particular drug regimen. It could be a new drug regimen like semaglutide. You can ask what is the 30-day readmission rate after a specific procedure in my practice, such as arteriovenous fistula or after acute kidney injury, and so on. Now, once you are comfortable with retrospective studies, you can go on to do pragmatic clinical trials. And the table on this slide lays it out. What is the difference between a traditional trial and a pragmatic trial? A traditional trial happens in a specialist center with narrowly selected patients. There is a rigid protocol and it needs often a big budget. Whereas a pragmatic trial happens in your clinic, it uses all your eligible patients in your real world workflow and hopefully comes at a low cost. The question that a pragmatic trial answers is the one that you actually care about. How does it work for my patients, not somebody else's patients? This is not an idealized patient in research bubble, but actual patient that you see. We saw the power of this during COVID. The recovery trial enrolled patients as part of routine care. They did not have any elaborate machinery for recruiting participants, and it saved millions of lives by quickly finding out what worked and what didn't. That's the same principle, just at your scale. Now, you are getting better. You are now becoming more encouraged, and you want to now participate in randomized clinical trials. One of the challenges that I often hear my colleagues mentioning is that they have difficulty enrolling patients. Their patients can't say yes. And here is, I'll say, your greatest asset. That's the trust they place in you, and you have to use it responsibly. Please speak plainly. Please speak in their language, not in any jargon. Please explain equipoise simply. You can say both of these are good treatments. We are trying to find out which is better for you. there is fear, of course, which you should address head on before they even voice it. You should clarify you're not a guinea pig. Both options are already part of standard care. And you can make autonomy real. You can say you can step out anytime and it won't change how I take care of you. On the consent form itself, it should be written in their language, not just English. Clarify the procedures and purpose clear. Risks and alternatives should be stated. And again, the same thing, the right to withdraw, the contact details, the witness signature that is now required by law, including ICMR. You can give them a time to think, ideally a day or two. Consent isn't a signature that you collect once, it is a conversation that you will continue to keep having with the patient as they keep coming back to you. Now, you can't run a trial single handed, even a small trial. But the team is smaller than you would guess. It doesn't take a huge number of people, right? You have to think about three roles. You are the principal investigator, you are responsible for the science, you are responsible for the clinical calls, the final sign off, they all will sit with you. Then you should always have a sub investigator, often a junior colleague who will handle the day to day assessment, screening, enrollment, etc. And the most important person, a study coordinator. He should be, or he or she should be, an organized staff member who will run the paperwork, they will do the scheduling, they will do the data entry. Sometimes one person can wear two hats, that's fine, but please do make a record of who does what. This is a single document that will protect you even when you're audited or inspected. A question that often comes: how do we form an ethics committee? So here are your options, and you have to first realize that all research involving individual human beings requires ethics clearance. And the other important thing is that you don't need to start your own ethics committees. You can partner with a medical college, you can work with an independent ethics committee, or lastly, the ICMR permits a single ethics committee process. So if you have multi-site studies or multi-centric studies, you can work with the coordinating center that can get an ethics approval through just their own ethics committee, and that ethics committee will be responsible for supporting study at your center as well. And this is what it shows, the ICMR single ethics framework, which has been released just a couple of months ago. And this is, I would say, a really, really big advance. Let's talk about the legal side, because this is where a lot of you may have genuine and reasonable concerns. The good news is that with a few safeguards in place, you can do this confidently. So there are three pillars that hold this up. The one is of informed consent that we already spoke about. The second is data privacy, and the third is regulatory compliance. Regulatory informed consent we have already covered. Now, data privacy means that you have to anonymize all data before you analyze. So the person who is doing the analysis should not have access to names and personal information. All data should be stored safely and in a secure manner. India now has what is called the Digital Personal Data Protection, or DPDP Act. This governs personal and health data. So please do build your habits around that standard right from the beginning. Now, the last one is the compliance. There are ICMR guidelines. Any clinical trial should be registered in Clinical Trial Registry of India, and you have to follow the other rules which are all listed there. The next question is, who will pay? What does it cost? Money is important because I'm sure you're wondering. The honest answer is that a retrospective study costs you almost nothing but your time. A trial, a randomized control trial, for example, will cost real money, so please know the line items before you start. On the cost side, there is an ethics review fees, and it could be waived at a partner medical college. CTI registration is free. A statistician may cost a little bit, or you can actually get one pro bono by promise of co-authorship, and you can share that cost with other academic colleagues as well. You can have a part-time study coordinator, which could be shared across multiple studies, or with other partners as well, you will need to get a trial insurance for regulatory drug trials, not for non-regulatory studies, and of course there is some cost to publication as well. Now, where did the money come from? Because that is what you will need to pay for the trials. There are industry-sponsored trials you can run at your center. Grants exist from ICMR, from DBT, from DHR, from state councils, from medical colleges, etc. Societies and fellowships also offer small research grants. And like I said earlier, retrospective studies, surveys have near zero cost. The cost is just your time. So please, let's realize that I can't afford it isn't true once you've seen the entire menu of research projects. Let's now come to practical research project ideas. Let's get concrete. The first possible project, a retrospective outcome study. This is the easiest place to begin. And I would suggest if you have to start anywhere, please do start here. You can pick a condition that you treat all the time, for example, diabetic kidney disease. Pull the last couple of years of records, capture the baseline, the treatment, the outcome. About 150 to 200 patients will give you something meaningful. Like I said, the tools, you just need Excel, your time. What about the timeline? It will take 2 to 3 weekends to collect the data, a week of analysis, 2 weeks of writing, and you have a manuscript that's publishable in a national journal. From difficult, you go to easy. This is what they call is your on-ramp. Second possible project, a patient awareness survey or a doctor's knowledge survey. This is even faster, and this even may not need a full ethics approval, but please check with your ethics committee because they may want to give you a waiver as well. You can build a short questionnaire, 10 to 15 questions. Please do make sure that those questionnaire are validated, they are tested against a focus group, etc. Pardon me. Once you've done that, put it in Google Forms. It's free and it charts the results for you also automatically. You can print a few copies also for people who don't have smartphones. You can collect the survey results over 2 to 4 weeks, and with 200 plus responses, voila, you have publishable data that shows you exactly where your care gaps are. Once again, very easy, near zero cost, and genuinely useful. Now, you're feeling more adventurous, you can go to a small scale pragmatic trial. This is ambitious, but this is the kind of work that may change practice. Here, what can you do? You can take two treatments that you already use for the same condition. One classic example is angiotensin receptor blocker versus ACE inhibitor for early diabetic nephropathy. You can look at blood pressure and proteinuria in 6 months. Because both are standard of care, you may want to know which maybe is one better than the other. So randomizing here is ethical. You can pull in 3 to 5 collaborative clinics and you can reach easily 200 to 300 participants. Again, you will need ethics approval, you will need to register the trial at CTRI, but the payoff is real because this kind of work, not exactly this one, could be practice changing that lands in international journals also. Now, look, you may be thinking, I'm not interested in research. This is all fine, but it's not for me at all. So let me gently push back. Often it could be because we are not picturing research in the broad enough sense. Every clinician, as I said, is already responsible for evaluating their own practice. Every one of us has to be able to read someone else's study and judge whether it's good or bad. And every one of us has to decide how the clinical guideline written elsewhere applies to the patient that is in front of us. It's really very, very important. So you don't have to publish to be a researcher in that sense, but the skills are the same and they make you a better doctor every possible way. So let me bring this all home and give you something concrete that you can actually do tomorrow. So here is the slide that shows you the benefit of integrating clinical care and research, something we discussed earlier. It improves patients' outcomes, it enhances evidence based practice, it allows faster translation of research finding into clinical practice, enhances patient empowerment, really improves the quality of care, and improves trust in healthcare providers. So, uh, if you forget everything else, just remember these facts. Your practice is a research setting. You already have this patient, your patients, and their data. Please start, if you want to, with retrospective work. It adds zero burden to your patients. Use free tools that I described already. Collaborate with your colleagues because multi-center private practice studies will punch well above their weight. Ethics approval is accessible, not that hard. Just partner with some colleagues. Uh, Documentation changes everything because good records protect you and strengthen your science as well. And the one point that matters the most is at the bottom, right? Indian patient data is urgently needed for Indian guidelines. You don't need a big budget or an academic title to provide it. Start with what you have and where you are. So, assuming you are seeing or listening to this talk on a Sunday, let me propose to you what can you do on your Monday morning. So don't end this talk with just inspiration because inspiration will fade by Tuesday, right? So please walk with some actions, and here I suggest four actions. The only thing I ask is please commit to the very first one, which is opening a notebook. Open a question notebook, and before you sleep on Monday night, write down three questions from the patients that you saw last week that you couldn't answer from your data. Next, you pick the one that you could answer from the records that you already have and run it through the finer network that or finer criteria that I described earlier. Next, please email one collaborator. He or she could be a peer, it could be local college ethics committee, or anyone else. And lastly, please, that's my request to you, block 30 minutes in a week in your calendar every week for research. This is called protected time. This is the whole game, and this is what turns good intentions into actual output. Now, there is a line I love: the best time to start was yesterday, and the next best time is now. So, thank you everyone. I'd genuinely love for Indian private practice to become a powerhouse of clinical evidence, and it starts with the people who are actually listening to this talk. So, this thank you very much.